standard qualified health plan designs until 12 p.m. on Tuesday, February 4th. And that is all I have to announce. I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you very much. I'll turn it to Ms. Stromolo and Mr. Houlihan. And please introduce yourselves and thanks for being here again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. This is Addie Stromolo. I'm the Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Vermont Health Access, here with my colleague Dana Houlihan and our partners at Wakely to present the proposed standard plan designs for the qualified health plans in 2026. It's really a pleasure to be here to kind of kick off the 2026 process, which we've all been through together quite a few times. The work that goes into today's presentation has been underway for quite a while and represents great collaborative work among interested parties and our partners at Wakely and others. So grateful for that. I am here to say that I'm hopeful that this step in the plan design approval is the most straightforward part of our 2026 planning. You all have an attachment in your materials that shows the on-exchange enrollment for 2025, and we're really starting off in a strong place. This is another record year of enrollment for the exchange. We have almost 31,000 effectuated enrollments, which is the highest we've seen since we allowed for that direct enrollment back in 2016 rather. And there are a few reasons for this strength. One is still kind of coming off of the Medicaid renewal restart that we had over the last couple of years. And then primarily, we are seeing more federal subsidies than ever, thanks to the changes that you all made to silver loading for 2025. And for that same reason, and in a very exciting way, more people are getting better coverage. We were able to move over I think it was 5,500 roughly people into gold plans from silver plans. And now almost half of the membership are enrolled in gold plans. So that's all starting with the good news. And again, hoping to kick things off in a strong place. We do expect this next year to be filled with uncertainty and potentially some pretty difficult outcomes for 2026. As you all know, the federal subsidies, the enhancement that was made by the American Rescue Plan Act and then the Inflation Reduction Act, that's scheduled to end at the end of this year, absent congressional action. That represents a hole of $65 million for Vermonters. It's also possible that the new federal administration could make other changes to traditionally state-led affordability mechanisms like silver loading. We published a marketplace affordability study earlier this month, which details some possible actions on the state level to address some of this, but the kind of bottom line is that there's really nothing that the state can do to address these enormous holes that potentially could be created by the federal government. One just kind of tangential piece of that report that I did want to mention here is that we are recommending maintaining separate individual and small group markets, and that legislation is moving through the State House as we speak, so that plans would be continued to be rated separately for the respective markets, and also that will allow us to potentially leverage more pass-through dollars if we want to go there. So it could be a really dynamic year in terms of reacting to federal changes and also continuing to try to address the affordability issues that we see so plainly on the state level. And I'm sure this group will need to come together again in the context of rate review and probably otherwise to strategize about that. But for today, thankfully, we only have to do one thing, which is make sure that we have good compliant plan designs to offer Vermonters in 2026. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dana. I do want to mention that this is Dana's last QHP cycle with us because he'll be retiring next month. And I promised him I wouldn't make a big deal about that, but I did just want to mention it. He's been through a lot with us, and I'm very grateful for all of his contributions. So I will pass it over to you, Dana. Thanks a lot.
Dana, I think you're muted. Which tells me you may not be ready for retirement, and maybe we'll need to do one more go round of this.
Well, technology has never been my strongest point. I apologize. Start again. I'm representing DIVA as Plan Management Director here, and I'm joined by Darren Johnson of Wakely Consulting, who has led us through the stakeholder process from terms of actuarial support, and our format will be very similar to previous years. So I'll just jump in. I'll provide this overview of a few just kind of focusing points on our process and who's involved to getting to the presentation we have today. Then it will go to Darren from Wakely Consulting to discuss the federal guidance changes that come around each year, how they will affect plan design, and then our proposed plan design changes for 2026. And then between now and next week, we'll finish with comments, questions, and discussion, and then finish with the approval vote at some point. Thank you. Just for review, we're focusing on the standard plans today. There's 1 platinum, 1 gold, 2 silver, and this is for each issuer. 1 will be a standard deductible plan, and 1 will be a high deductible format, and then 3 bronze, 1 of which is a high deductible format. So that's 7 total. And of course, in the standard plan area, the benefits will be the same between issuers, even though the rates are not. I just briefly point out that I provided this handout. This shows the 2025 plan designs and premiums to give you an idea of what's on the market right now for QHP customers on the individual market. This segment right here, beginning with platinum and ending with this bronze plan, these 7 plans are the ones that we're discussing today. So there are selected benefits on this page and the rates down below. Again, a reminder of the composition of our stakeholder group. I represent DIVA on the group. We have representatives from all of our issuers. Even though this is just medical QHPs, we have someone from NED who wants to keep abreast of all of the changes, so we're very glad to have her. We have 2 representatives from the Healthcare Advocate, and we have a staff member from DFR and Green Mountain Care Board, mostly in a listening capacity, but they're very helpful to clarify things for context as we go through. So we meet from beginning in November, which is timed around when federal guidance typically comes out. And Darren will provide more information on that for 2026. And we finished by January this year. We finished actually in late December, which was great. And so that's our process there. So we have active discussion. I can say that most of the time we agree and get consensus after we review a lot of modeling. We usually come to consensus, but not always. But I can say there's active participation, and we aren't in a position of implementing a proposed plan design without general, strong support from our stakeholder group. So that feels good. I won't read the details here, but these are our kind of design principles to the extent that they can be impacted by the plan design and the tight guide rails that we have with federal guidance to stay in AV compliance. But we review these and keep them in mind as we go through our process. As Addie mentioned, we focus a lot on affordability, again, to the extent that the plan design process can impact affordability. Generally, a higher AV aligns with higher premium. We have implemented enhanced silver loading in 2025. And expect that to continue into 2026. We'll see. And as Darren will point out, in the silver category, the AV ranges have been compressed for a few years by the feds to focus on the higher end of the range, which again maximizes subsidy and therefore affordability. You'll see in the information that Darren will present that for 2026, there were some plans that actually could have remained unchanged from 2025 to 2026. And in all cases, we, as a stakeholder group, believe that implementing strategic minimal increases saves customers from larger, more abrupt changes in following years. So we're really focused on being able to implement minimal increases year over year instead of something that will be difficult to afford or manage for an enrollee. Overall costs being out-of-pocket costs as well as premium. We're always mindful of that. And then we don't want to implement or propose plan designs that are difficult for customers to understand. So we're thinking about plan designs that are customer friendly and therefore will more likely be used to get the services they need. Just a reminder of the where we are in the 2026 certification cycle. So we're in this first step of the proposed plan designs and approval in February. The next major milestone is in March when the issuers, medical and dental, will submit their forms for review to DFR. And that goes from March with a target date of completed review and approval in June. The final IRS limits on HDHP plans will be in the spring of this year. That's the typical timing. And as Darren will point out, there is always a possibility that may need to come back and tweak some benefits on the HDHP based on the final limits. But for today's presentation, we've made our best guess based on prior years to build our plan designs. Rate proposals are due in May. This is a process you're closely familiar with, of course. And then final decisions are targeted for August. Understanding that that's a target date and hoping that we can keep that. And then the once final rates are available, the DEVA commissioner completes certification at the end of August. And as always, open enrollment is November 1st to January 15th. That will be 2026. Okay, so with that, I can stop sharing, and then Darren, if you want to take it from here and begin.
Perfect. Thanks, Dana. Yeah, so I'll hop in on what we're gonna discuss today, and then we'll work through all the plan design changes. And if you have questions as we're going, feel free to hop in. Otherwise, we'll definitely try to pause for questions kind of as we're going, and then at the end as well. And then thanks, Dana, as well, for shepherding us through this process for another year. We'll miss you next year, but I'm sure you'll enjoy your retirement. Okay, so let's start with what changed regulatory-wise for 2026 with regards to this process, not commenting on potential broader changes around subsidy levels or any other thing that could occur. The big change was the annual limitation on cost sharing was released, has been finalized for 2026, and this sets the maximum out-of-pocket amount, the highest level that can be set at. And for 2026, that level is $10,150, an increase of $950 from the $9,200 it was in 2025. That's the largest increase we've ever seen. It was a little bit of a weird couple-year period because in 2024, the limit was $9,450. We then had the only decrease we'd ever seen to $9,200 in 2025. And now we're having a huge increase in 2026. Those values are calculated based on projections of kind of ESI premiums and wages, and there's a formula, statutory formula that kind of decides those. But obviously a pretty big whiplash over the last few years for that value. As Dana mentioned, the HDHP minimum deductible and out-of-pocket limits, which impact the HDHP plan designs, standard plan designs that we have, are not yet released yet. Last year they were $1,650 for the deductible and $8,250 for the MOOP. The deductible one is the one that matters the most for the plan designs, is that's kind of the floor on what the deductibles and especially the pharmacy deductibles for those plan designs can be set at. Our approach has just been to not account for changes ahead of time, just to kind of go off what it has been, and then if it increases down the line, we can adjust slightly. The increases are typically quite small, $50 to $100. I think based on our projections, we expect it'll go to $1,700. That is unlikely to impact plan designs heavily, but we'll model it again when it comes out and see how things are looking. The MOOP does typically increase a little more. As mentioned, that doesn't really impact the Vermont standard plan designs. The 2026 notice of benefit and payment parameters is finalized for this year. There was not a whole lot that really impacts this standard plan design process. Really, the main thing was just that annual limitation on cost sharing that was released separately. For the 2026 actuarial value calculator, that's the other piece that comes out that really heavily impacts this process. So you've all seen this before, but running through it quickly, SIO releases an actuarial value calculator for every plan year. This model is what determines whether a given benefit design will fit the compliance ranges to be at a certain metal level. Has a number of different plan design features that you can input. Not all features are necessarily supported by the AVC, so you are allowed to either modify your inputs or do adjustments outside the AVC to account for those unique plan design features. The AV that comes out of this calculator will differ from the pricing AV used by carriers to determine premiums. It's based on summarized national data. Carriers will typically use Vermont specific experience. Models and methodologies may differ from what's used in the AVC, and then the AVC does not represent all service categories. For example, urgent care is not in the AVC. So the 2026 federal actuarial value calculator is final. They used to release a draft kind of late fall, early winter, and then a final kind of early spring, late winter, not spring, I guess, late winter. Going forward, the plan is no draft AVCs. It'll just be a final one every year. That speeds up our process a bit. Not a whole lot of changes this year. The last 2 years, we've had very big changes to the ABC. 2 years ago, there was a large methodological change into how they accounted for copays impacting deductibles. Last year, they updated the data set to go from using kind of a more large group employer insurance data set to using the EDGE data, that is ACA specific data. This year, they're sticking with that 2021 EDGE data. I expect next year we'll go to 2022 and see what happens, but for this year, we're sticking with 2021. They did add an extra year of trend then to take 2021 to 2026, as opposed to last year it was to 2025. Trend is very high, 6.1% for medical cost trend is what they use, 10.1% for drug cost trend. So that drives a lot of the changes that we're going to see is just going to be that trend level and then the change in the MOOP. So that drives benefit leveraging across all metal levels. If your total costs are going up, 7% between the blended medical and pharmacy, a deductible of $2,000 is going to be worth more after that than it was before. Due to the de minimis ranges that we'll show in the next couple slides, silver and gold plans are the most likely to be impacted. Bronze has a very wide de minimis range. Platinum plans have a fairly wide de minimis range as well. So mostly silver and gold is what we're looking at. And then obviously they updated the maximum MOOP you could put in the model to that $10,150 level. I'll pause quick there. Any questions before we continue? Perfect. I'll caveat, and again, you've all seen this caveat before. The following slides, we're going to have an estimated premium impact that we show just to kind of quantify the changes in AVs into some sort of rough expected premium impact. That's just to sort of illustrate the trade-off, give something trade-off between plan designs, give some idea of what the balance of cost sharing and premium looks like. We're not trying to model the actual premium change that the carriers are going to end at. It may differ significantly from what we show. This is based on our internal model. We don't adjust for all the benefit designs that are not necessarily accommodated. For example, the Vermont specific embedded aggregate drug maximum out of pocket on the HDHPs based on high level estimates of allowed PMPMs. Anyway, they're a helpful reference point, should not be seen as necessarily approximating actual premium changes. And those premium impacts are just reflecting the changes to premiums from changes in benefit designs. We're not reflecting any projected changes in morbidity or regulatory environment or trend or anything else. So to summarize, when we took the 2025 plan designs and ran them through the 2026 model, we saw 3 plans that will require changes due to the changes in the federal ABC. They are now outside the de minimis ranges. As Dana discussed earlier, even if changes are not required, the stakeholder group usually likes rolling in some changes to avoid, big whiplashes like we saw with the MOOP over the last couple of years. And then all the CSR plan designs for silver deductible and silver HDHP will need to be changed as well. Those we include in an appendix to this report. We don't go through it in the full presentation. We also, I mentioned those kind of unique plan design features. We have additional adjustments we apply for features that are not supported by the federal ABC. That includes the Vermont provision of waiving the deductible for preventive prescription drugs. We add an extra cushion to our AV on HDHP, so we bring down the top of the range to reflect that the ABC cannot model that. Similarly, for the limiting out-of-pocket expenses for insulin regulations, we add a 0.1% cushion on bronze plans to reflect that. And these values come from studies that we've done on data, Vermont-specific data, both ourselves and that the issuers have done. And then there's the 3 free mental health and substance abuse visits on non-HDHP plans. This is just a multiplicative factor that we apply to the final AV we get. And I didn't mention it here, but we do also use a separate Vermont-specific model to account for the HDHP plans having in that aggregate deductible structure where you have just a family deductible and not an individual deductible. The ABC doesn't really support that either. So just a table of a bunch of numbers with some results. So the main takeaways here is just, for our base silver plan, the top of our range is a 72.0. Silver was at a 72.4. Gold was very close to the top of the range at an 82.0. Rounding takes us up to the top of the range. The bronze without pharmacy limit was another one that typically is near the top end of the the federal range and went over this year with that slightly lowered upper limit because of the insulin provisions. And then the silver HDHP also went over the adjusted threshold for the preventive prescription drug deductible. And then as a reminder, we have marked changes in either green or orange with whether they require formal approval. This year, the main one is going to be deductible increases because the federal MOOP limit increased by so much. Oh, sorry, I have the wrong value in there. $950 increase for 2026. Sorry, that's reflecting last year's change, which was a decrease. So everything required approval. $915 increase this year. So that'll be the only thing that requires approval. So here we have just a quick summary of the changes we made to the plans. We'll go through all of these in detail, but just a summary slide up front. And as I mentioned, the one change that does require that formal approval is the medical deductible increase on the bronze without RX limit plan. Any questions there before we start going through plan designs? Okay, so starting with the platinum plan. So with each of these, I'll show kind of the history of the plan design, go through the options we looked at, and then just a couple bullet points on the decisions that the stakeholder group made. So for the platinum plan, that's been fairly steady the last few years. As I mentioned, the last couple AVCs have been generally slightly atypical in that they often kept AVs pretty similar, or even they lowered a little bit year over year. Whereas this year with the trend increase and no other changes, it's kind of more typical to what we saw in the past. Where AVs kind of increased across the board. So not a whole lot of movement in this one over the years. Small changes to deductible and MOOP. So what we looked at with this plan was our preferred option was lowering a couple copays a little bit for specialists and urgent care visits, and then increasing the deductible a little bit to counteract that. As I mentioned, the premium impact piece we have both on an annual basis and then on a monthly basis. So I kind of like to look at the annual just as the easiest spot to look. So the backup option was to keep it exactly the same, and we're showing a premium impact there. That's reflecting the pure impact of projected trend. So even if the plan design is left the same, we think this plan design is likely to be more expensive in 26 due to that benefit leveraging due to the trend increasing claims. So that's kind of the baseline on this one was a $50 premium increase. If we increase the deductible a little bit, lowered some copays a little bit, we cut that down just a little bit and then increase some benefit richness. As mentioned, that's basically summarizing what I just said. Again, it's within the AV range. We're recommending some slight tweaks. On the gold deductible plan, this is another one that historically had pretty large changes year over year. Again, kind of due to that benefit leveraging, that was usually the case. $200 deductible increase, $100 deductible increase, $200 deductible increase. Back in 24, we increased copays a little bit instead of adjusting the deductible just because of how much it had increased in a short period. And then last year, due to the AVC changes, we were able to mostly leave the plan alone other than an update to the pharmacy MOOP. This year, that has resulted in the 25 plan design being right at the top end of the allowable range, which likely would set up next year for requiring very large changes to the plan design to remain within compliance. So the stakeholder group recommended a couple of options to lower that a little bit and lower the premium impact too. Of note with this plan too is that the medical deductible is waived for preventive office visits. That's what the OV stands for, urgent care and ambulance. So it applies to less than some of the other plans we're going to see. So that's always worth looking at as we go through these. Is some of these plans are a lot more sensitive to the deductible than other ones are because of how much it applies to. And similarly, the drug deductible on this one's only waived for generic scripts. Some other ones will have different sets of benefits there that it's waived for. So the primary stakeholder recommendation was increasing deductible and medical deductible and MOOP by 100, and then the pharmacy deductible and MOOP by 50. That brings the AV down about 0.4%, so a little more cushion for future years, and then an estimated premium impact of a little under $60. A backup option was just to leave the pharmacy deductible at the 200 level. That has a small impact on premiums, and the AV increases a minor amount as well. Again, as mentioned, kind of what Dana was talking about as well, just stakeholder group was approving of minor increments here to both reduce the premium and then limit likely changes next year when the ABC is updated again. On the silver deductible plan, this is again one that in the past required frequent, fairly large deductible increases, $400 2019 to 2020, $222, $623. And again, with the ABC changes in the last few years, we were able to cut that back a little bit. Just MOOP impacts in 24, and then in 25, actually a substantial deductible reduction and a small MOOP reduction due to the 2025 ABC's quirks, just to stay within the minimus range, and some copay reductions. So this year, this plan is outside of the range. 72.0% is the top. This one was at a 72.4, so changes are required for compliance with the federal regulations. On this one, again, this is one where the deductible is waived for a fairly wide variety of services. The stakeholder group generally want it to leave deductible and copays kind of where they were after the benefit increases last year, and just adjust the MOOP to be at the federal limit. This plan has historically had the MOOP at the federal limit about 2/3 of the time. As I look at these values, it's often been close to it. It seemed like in the data the carriers were looking at, a lot more members hit their deductible than hit their out-of-pocket max. So if they had to choose between increases to one or the other, it seemed like the out-of-pocket max was potentially the way to go. So that was the general thoughts there. That drops almost a percentage point off the AV. So we're a decent bit below the de minimis range. And also our model at least projects that fairly limited premium impact then from those plan design changes. And then the backup option was, again, just leaving pharmacy the same and only impacting the medical with minor increments to the AV. And our model doesn't really capture, the Wakely model, I should say, doesn't really capture the impact of that embedded pharmacy MOOP, as I had mentioned. And then onto the Silver HDHP plan. So this one has that lower cushion due to the Vermont specific features. Again, this is a plan that historically has had pretty large deductible increases at times, including $250 in 23. Again, fewer changes the last few years. This will be a common refrain. Coinsurances did increase in 2024. And then in 2025, the, let's see, PCP and mental health and substance abuse office visit coinsurance was brought back down a little bit as part of the process last year. As a reminder, this plan design, if the HDHP limits change, will have to be tweaked a little bit. That will lower the AV a little bit, so it won't impact compliance at all, but will change final numbers a bit. As mentioned, this plan has that lower limit, 71.5%, so the 2025 plan design was out of compliance as we went into the 2026 process. Recommendation from stakeholders was increasing deductible and MOOP both by $200. That brings us down to a 71.0%, so we have a little bit of cushion. There is a somewhat larger premium impact with that plan design, say about $80 on an annual basis. And then backup option was even slightly higher increases to bring that premium impact down a little more, but the preferred option was just the $200 increases. As mentioned, the deductible has been held steady for 2 years. Increases needed now to bring the plan into compliance. The large embedded deductible increase, so since this is an HDHP plan, as I mentioned, typically there's no individual deductible, there's just the family level deductible, but the ACA does have that embedded deductible as well, where no person can go over the 90 to 100 last year, or 10,150 this year, regardless of the other limits. Going from 9,200 to 10,150 on that is a somewhat decent benefit decrease. So that did adjust the AV down a little bit when going from 25 to 26 as well. Moving forward to our bronze plans. So this is the bronze plan that includes the pharmacy limits, that Vermont specific pharmacy limits. This plan has not needed a ton of changes the last few years. Deductible and medical and pharmacy deductible have been the same since 2022. And typically the MOOP has been set just at that, whatever the federal limit is in that given year. Again, that's kind of informed by our stakeholder group comments on bronze members, and typically not hitting their MOOPs as much, and there seems to be more of a concern in those members on premiums than what the MOOP is set at. So this one was within the range. 64.9 is the top end of the range on this one. We're at a 63.1 when we move to the 2026 AVC. But kind of given where the MOOP has been historically on this plan and the premium concerns of typical bronze members, the stakeholder group recommended rolling those out-of-pocket max amounts to the federal limits. Our modeling says that's a slight premium decrease just from those impacts, and a decent sized decrease to the AVC. Yeah, leaving the deductible at the same level. So 4 years of this plan having the same deductible, but yeah, updating that out-of-pocket max to kind of where it's been historically. And then, yeah, this is the opinions of the stakeholder group is that generally members want a steady deductible and lower premiums over the higher out-of-pocket max based on their data. Next up, we have the bronze deductible plan that does not have the Vermont-specific pharmacy limits. So this is a very simple plan structure, just deductible equals out-of-pocket max. The deductible is only waived for preventive and office visits. Drugs only waived for generic. And generally, it just kind of sticks at or near the federal limits with some other features, a couple other copays in other places. So this one is, again, outside of the limit. We have that slightly lower de minimis range due to that preventive drug, or sorry, the insulin piece. And, we're 1.2% out of compliance with the plan design from last year. Similar to the last plan, the recommendation was just to take both deductible and MOOP up to the federal limit. That, again, results in what we project as a slight premium decrease due to plan design changes and get this into compliance. So, again, just by a little bit. This kind of plan design structure has been one that can be pretty tight to the de minimis ranges as the underlying data in the federal AV calculator has decreased, but still within compliance. We could go down to a $10,000 limit and still squeak under the de minimis range, but the stakeholder group felt just moving to the federal limit was probably the move on this type of plan design. Again, members are usually premium conscious, and this keeps the AV very similar to the 2025 levels. Now for the bronze HTHP, again, this is a plan where it has had larger deductible changes in the past. We've been able to keep it at the same level since 2023. Just slight MOOP changes. This was another one last year where actually had a slight benefit increase on the medical MOOP side, going from a 7,200 to a 7,100. With the changes in the federal AVC. This plan was within range, was at a 63.2. Again, we might have to tweak it a little bit down the line when we get those final HDHP limits. Similar to the other bronze plans, there was concerns on premium impacts with this one. This plan is especially sensitive to that benefit leveraging effect because the medical deductible is only waived for preventive services. So anything else and drug is only waived for wellness scripts, not even for generic scripts. So any swings in projected claim costs pretty much all hit the deductible. So high leveraging. So even with projecting fairly substantial deductible and out-of-pocket max increases, we're still showing a premium impact of almost $70 on an annual basis. Without any of those changes, it was significantly higher. Similar to the other bronze plans, that was something that the stakeholder group definitely tried to minimize on these plan designs. So that was the recommended option there. Again, trying to keep the 2025 AV was 62.1. We're trying to get close to that level at the 62.3 while limiting premium impact. And then we just have a refresh of the summary of plan design changes slide that we had at the start of everything, going through all the recommended changes to the standard plan designs. Okay, any questions there? Do you want me to run through any of the other tons of numbers we have on any of these slides?
I'm good, Darren. I don't know about the other board members.
I'm good. I did want to just make a comment to say thank you to Dana for sending the enrollment snapshot information, which I've used to always ask for every year. So I appreciate you just sending that along. And we did note that there was some substantial movement into the higher AV levels of gold plans from silver, which I understand is due to the mapping that Diva did. So I also just wanted to say that's terrific. It looks like it really benefit a lot of Vermonters, and thank you for your work on that.
Then I noted earlier, we have some additional appendices in this presentation. So if you want to look through, we include just kind of all plan designs laid out, and then the CSR variations for the both the standard silver and then the silver HDHP if you wanted to look at those as well. There's no more question, then that concludes our portion of the presentation.
Thank you. Dana or Addie, anything else on your end?
No, thank you. Not for me.
Okay, great. I had just one question which relates to Member Lunge's comment. I was curious what you did to improve the uptake in the gold plans. We appreciated whatever it was that you did, and that having 5,500 additional lives move to gold is extremely beneficial. That's what we had hoped. And I want to again thank the healthcare advocate and our council for working us towards that decision, because it's really impactful and it's one of the rare highlights we have in our healthcare system right now. So really positive, and thank you everyone for doing that. And if you could just speak to what you actually did to achieve that, I'd love to hear it.
Addie, well, I can start to respond to that if you want to add anything, but unless you'd rather answer. Let me go ahead. Well, one thing with the implementation of the revised silver loading process and policy across the board, gold plans became less expensive than on exchange silver plans. So there was the pricing differential that people became aware of, that they could actually enroll, switch to a gold plan for less premium costs. So that was a factor for certain. And then for the 77 and 73% CSR levels, we actually mapped those enrollees into gold plans. We worked with the issuers to identify the appropriate gold plan that we would move them to. And so that was a real benefit to customers. They had a richer plan for less cost than the unexchanged silver plan would have been for them. So I think those are the two primary factors. Just really having to do with cost. And then some were actually mapped, meaning that upon renewal, they didn't, we wouldn't renew them into a 73% or 77% CSR plan. We re-enroll them into a gold plan. So
I see. So it was like a default that they would automatically be moved over to that plan. Is that how it worked?
yes, and there was a lot of communication around that, and the notices were very specific about it so that customers weren't surprised, but and that it was a benefit to them, a richer plan at lower cost. And of course, during open enrollment, customers always have the ability to choose another plan. But in any case, we mapped enrollees out of those two CSR levels.
Great. Thank you. And congratulations on the success on that. I have no other questions. I'll just open up to any other board members. Okay, hearing none. Mr. Houlihan, you're a well-oiled machine on these, and thank you so much for your commitment to the state and your work in all these years. And I hope you have a great retirement. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'll turn to the healthcare advocate for any questions or comments they have.
I'll just speak to Member Lunge and your question, Chair Foster, that it was overall a pretty a resounding success. I think there were substantial challenges with issues due to price differential that were caused mainly by price differentials between the carriers for folks on 87 and 94, and substantial limitations on that, and at least the cost as a percentage of income, whether someone switched to, say, MVP versus stayed on Blue Cross could be huge. And I think, when we were initially doing this, it was we didn't consider that factor. We didn't think that perhaps those price differentials could be so huge. So that was another complication. And I think it's a complication that we all realized fairly late in the process, myself included, existed. And I think DIVA and our advocates did a great job at trying to address that. And I hope that this year that we're likely to see similar differentials. At least I would expect those differentials to persist. And we have a bit more time to deal with the challenges of silver loading that the lowest income Vermonters will face. Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment via the raise the hand function? Hey, Walter, how are you?
Hey, Owen, how's it going? I'm still alive.
That's where we like you.
I hope not many others like it that way, though.
You and me
I
both,
just
buddy.
wonder when not many others, and it's probably going to get worse in a little bit. Just a question: when they talk about stakeholder groups, does that include insurees who are on these plans? Because I know people that are on these plans and they just laugh when you talk about can they afford them. Ha ha. I talked to one yesterday and she's paying like $19,000 before she can even use the damn thing.
This is Dana. We don't have representation from specifically or directly from consumers on there. Because we're dealing with the requirements that come down from the feds to keep these plans into compliance, we compose a group from the issuers and from the healthcare advocate, certainly keeping the interests of consumers in mind as we go through our process.
Curious,
Thank you,
Dana,
Dana.
why we're called consumers, but.
All right, thank you, Dana and Walter. Any other questions or comments at this time? Okay, great. Well, thank you to the DIVA team and Wakely team for another presentation, and I'm sure we'll be looking at this pretty soon. So thank you. Is there any old or new business to come before the board? All right, hearing none, I will move to adjourn.
Second.
And all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And we're adjourned. Thank